comments and we'll go. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. I'm gonna cut off a second. Councilman, where would you get ready to start? Okay. Thank you very much. Let me call the Reno City Council special session to order. And Mr. Cadlick, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will observe a moment of silence. Madam Clerk, would you read the roll, please?
Paschev, absent. Guston.
Here.
Zadra. Here. Sferaza. Here. Dorch. Here. Ayazi. Cashel, absent.
Thank you. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Are there any questions, additions, deletions to the minutes of the March 30th, 2011 meeting? If not, we have a motion to approve. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Our next agenda item is public comment. So I'll take these in order of which they were given to me. Jeffrey Calabria. Please state your name and...
My name is Jeffrey Calabria.
Calabria, thank you.
And I've been coming to every council meeting, trying to get the something changed in the city of Reno about cars being towed by landlords simply for no registration. I've had a neighbor that had a car towed. He went out, got a car from a private party, got it smogged, took it home, parked it, went out, jumped on the bus, went to the DMV. While he's waiting at the DMV, his landlord had the car towed. I figured there should be some kind of 24-hour notice or at least a non-op registration. A problem my wife and I are facing is a car of ours was towed, and we were really close to getting ready for me to go back to work. I used to be a flagger. I was on disability because I got clipped by a car, smashed the entire right side of my face. I'd been on disability for a few years. I want to get back into the workforce. The I've got a list here of things I would need, but the one thing on that list is a car. I can get a car. Unfortunately, it won't be operable. I can work on it and make it work for us. But unfortunately, we still run into the same problem, this car being towed while I'm trying to get it legal. Something's got to be changed. We get a car, it gets towed because we can't get the registration on it because the car isn't operable. Being on disability, we cannot purchase a car. They won't allow us to. I'm trying to get back into being a flagger, and I don't know what else to do. I'm stuck. I got 2 little boys at home, and $485 that my wife pulls in and $485 that I pull in ain't enough to support the whole household.
Mr. Calabria, we don't normally ask questions, but I'm going to pose on the council, ask you a question. At the last meeting, the mayor said someone was going to contact you, and I think somebody gave you a card. Did somebody contact you?
No one contacted me.
Tracy Chase, Reno City Attorney's Office. Our office was asked to look into that matter. Deputy City Attorney Campbell actually spoke to Mr. Calabria after the meeting. We have finished researching that, and we were going to provide him the NRS. But most of what he is seeking to change is in state law, and it would not be within the jurisdiction, unfortunately, of the City of Reno to assist in this matter. I can provide copies of that to Mr. Calabria. If he chooses, you know, we could do that. If you could come upstairs to the 3rd floor maybe and schedule a meeting, we could give you copies, or if you have an address, we can mail it to you.
I can give you my address. I was hoping there'd be some kind of non-op registration that we could put onto a car, you know?
Yeah. And again, Tracy Chase, Reno City Attorney's Office. The problem, Mr. Calabria, is as a city, we can only create laws and ordinances that are consistent with state law. So we cannot change state law as a city when they have already enacted ordinances and statutes in this area.
Okay, I just feel the landlord's given too much power on this.
We empathize with you, but she'll give you the state law, and I'll make one other personal comment that years ago I did work for the state and found out that the job that you had is the most dangerous job in the state. More people are injured or killed in the job that you had as a flagger than any other in the state, and not a lot of people know that, but that's true, so I wish you good luck in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carmen Gage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council. My name is Carmen Gage, and I'm president of the Country Club Acres Neighborhood Association. Ms. Donna Keats and I are here to alert you to an issue that should be of great concern to all of you, especially with the economic situation of our city. Funding in the amount of $1.2 million has been approved through the Washoe County Home Consortium and will go to final approval to the Regional Planning Governing Board tomorrow. The funding is for a new development on a portion of the site of the original Plum Lane crossing adjacent to Virginia Lake. The project will contain 66 units for low-income seniors. I attended the February 14th meeting of the Technical Review Committee of the Washoe County Home Consortium. At that time, I discovered that the project had already been approved without being presented to the Neighborhood Advisory Board, the Planning Commission, or the City Council. I was told that none of that was required since the project is to be located in the transit-oriented district and meets density and use standards for the overlay district. Since the for-profit developers will be receiving $1.2 million taxpayer dollars along with the property tax waiver that the City of Reno will issue for this project, shouldn't the public have some input in this and other such projects? I want to make it clear that we're not against low-income senior housing, but rather the lack of opportunity for public participation. Twice now, Mr. Eric Young has stated that the Technical Review Committee does not have guidelines in order to make correct decisions on, for instance, the appropriateness of the location for such developments. Furthermore, we have not seen a needs assessment or feasibility study on the project. A number of these developments have been constructed or are being constructed in both Reno and Sparks. Still, some still have the large signs advertising low-cost senior housing available. So we question whether another 66 units are appropriate on Virginia Lake, located adjacent to the highest density as well as the highest crime area of the city. Once again, the funding of this particular project is on the Regional Planning Governing Board meeting agenda for tomorrow. The number of you are on that board. I ask that you give serious thought to my comments and those of Ms. Keats in order to make an appropriate conclusion on this project and all future taxpayer-funded projects, and most especially those that take away much-needed tax income from the city of Reno. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Mr.
Jessica?
Vice Mayor, can I ask a question, Mr. City Attorney? Because Jody's here, is that possible?
You can ask the question, but it's not something that I'm going to be able to answer because this is not agendized under the open meeting law. I mean, it's something that we would take back to the office and get you information
No,
back.
I wanted to ask Jody on the home funds, because we approve those before they go to regional.
I think Ms. Royal Goodwin could answer this one
Yeah,
question.
I've just got a couple questions. I'm not deliberating. I just have questions
There's
for
nothing for
the.
us to deliberate, it's not
Yeah.
in front of us.
Jody Royal Goodwin, Community Reinvestment Manager for the City of Reno. Actually, the home funds don't come before council for approval. They're approved through a process with the Technical Review Committee and then the directors, which are the three managers of the three jurisdictions. And once they approve it, the Regional Planning Governing Board ratifies that.
Buys it. Okay. And then the 1.2 million, those are federal funds that have to go in the state funds, Jody, for specific low-income housing for seniors?
Correct.
So, and it's no different than Wells Avenue or the rest of the units that we've done?
Correct.
So is this one different? I mean,
It's not a different type of project, it's just in a different location.
okay. I just wanted clarification. I'm not on regional, that's why I was asking the questions now, Carmen. So, thank you.
Our next speaker, Donna Keats.
Hello. My name is Donna Keats. I am here, as you know, to talk about these same funds, and hopefully, because there are so many different things that came to the neighborhood's attention recently, we submitted to you written documentation because I can't go through all these things in 3 minutes. And I'm hoping that you'll read them later because the funds have not been ratified at this point, and I think there are a lot of structural issues with this project. One being, there was a major modification done. There's no documentation. The revised budgets don't actually specify where at least what was presented at the Technical Review Committee, copies that I got, don't actually specify the home funds versus other funding. There are just a lot of things like that. I wrote it all down because I can't actually address it all right now. What Carmen mentioned about the needs study, I did actually go look up all that information, and their application document quotes a lot of information from 2008, numbers from 2008, and they satisfy the 2010-2014 goals by telling you about the projects that they've already done, not how this fits in. I mean, there are just so many things in this application. I'm sure it's not the particular applicant, it's the structural process. Mr. Ayazi seems to think I have a NIMBY problem. I want to make it clear that's not what this is about. Nodding his head, he does. It's not what this is about. The system is just flawed, and I only just found out about this for the first time about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I've gone to the meetings, I've talked to the staff, gotten a lot of information. I've read the needs studies, where they got their information from. Their property was a $1.6 million property in 2008 when we needed low-income housing. I was recently helping a friend find a house. There's affordable housing vacancies advertised all over the city. The needs study is not current to time and place right now. And I just fail to understand why there aren't uses of these funds that go in neighborhoods that really need them, where there should be locational criterion. This was an opportunity cost, this piece of property. It's in the Plum Lane Crossing Overlay District. I gave you some information. The first 3 items are regulatory nonconformance issues. CDC probably doesn't agree with me, but I looked at their recent plan. There's no way, using all possible parking reductions, that this building meets the parking standards required by the zoning. It just doesn't, and I double dipped on everything. 25% reductions, AMI reductions, I did everything. I still couldn't get it as low as the number that they've got in there. Plum Lane Crossing Overlay District, in the master plan, I realize it's not regulatory, but it specifies parking goes behind. This is right in front. Parking areas cover is larger than the building footprint, visible from Virginia Lake. The access is between Cadillac and the new access to the failing development. There will be 3 access roads onto Linbury within 600 linear feet. It just doesn't seem like this maintains and enhances the Plum Lane Crossing area, which is the stated purpose in Title 18. Anyway, I hope that you'll take the trouble to read this and actually consider it from a point of view of presenting information and structural flaws, and not because I just hate low-income senior housing. That's not what this is about. And it's only to my attention because it's in my neighborhood for the first time. That's it. Thank you. I hope you'll read what I gave you. I spent a lot of time on it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have any more comments on this particular topic?
I don't know. There's one more. We have one more. Mr. Lewis Gage.
Yes, I'm Lewis Gage, and due to the complexity of this...
I'm sorry, you need to come forward so it's on the record. Thank you.
Well, due to the complexity of this subject, and Donna Keats has done a lot of research on it, and she's got it summarized in this, I'd like to cede the remainder of my time to her. I don't think she was finished with what she had to say. Is that correct, Donna? Yeah, come on up.
Well, we can't do that. Each person has 3 minutes. In this circumstance, we can't give your time to her. I think she's documented it pretty well.
Okay, then if you're not going to allow that, then I would like to see each of you study thoroughly all this documentation that was provided to you. Probably what Donna had to say, and the remaining stuff she might want to cover is in there. I've read that. And it seems to me that this project is being pushed will be pushed to completion without the satisfactory public input to it, as it should have public input. There's tax dollars involved there, and plus quite a large amount of tax concession that the city will be making on that property. It amounts to several $1 million over the time of the agreement, and I just don't think that the city of Reno at this time can afford to do that. There's plenty of housing available already. There's lots of vacant apartments and houses and all the rest of that in the town, and to build a new building and have the city lose the tax revenue that would be due on that is not the way it should be done, especially with the financial situation that the city finds itself in, as well as the federal money that's coming, the federal government that's making the contribution, or the state, wherever the other money's coming from. Everybody's broke, so we don't need to be giving away tax money, spending tax money, and then giving away the potential tax revenue on this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just ask, is there anyone else in the audience that wanted to make public comment that didn't fill out one of these sheets? Okay, thank you. Councilman Zadra.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, could, Jody, could you and John get with these individuals, because they clearly learned of this, many of them learned of it just 4 or 5 days ago at a neighborhood advisory board, and there is conflicting information, and so for them to be able to state their case as best possible tomorrow at regional planning, if you could help identify where some of those issues are, like parking and some of the other questions that they brought forward, so that tomorrow at regional planning they'll be more informed and understand the process that you did and perhaps didn't go through, so that you can make your plea to regional planning with some additional information. Okay. So they'll get with you just right now or shortly after our meeting.
Let them have it. Okay. Okay. Let's move to agenda item A6, discussion and potential direction to staff regarding proposed state legislation and other matters relating thereto. Chris?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Manager. Chris Good from the City Manager's Office. You'll note that I am not Ms. Matievich. She is busy in Carson City even as we speak. As you know, this is a very busy week in Carson City. She tells me she will be here next week with an absolutely full developed report on the other side of Friday's deadline for legislation to get through committee. So next week, she'll have a much clearer perception of which bills have died, and the future of the bills that are left on the table. But I do have a few things to bring to your attention this afternoon. I don't have specific bills to request your direction on, although of course I'll take direction. If you have questions, I can attempt to answer them, but we'll see how that goes. First, I'd like to start out with good news. AB 360, Assembly Bill 360, regarding civil violations, civil penalties for code violations, sponsored for the city by Assemblyman Bobzian, passed unanimously at a Government Affairs Committee this morning. So the next step for that bill is the Assembly floor. You have the staff report in front of you that is pretty lengthy. It covers 33 bills and the status of each. Just very briefly, I'd like to bring to your attention that SB 491 regarding diversion of property tax revenue to the state general fund. This is something that the city has opposed. It has a hearing tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Senate Revenue. Ms. Matievich tells me she will be there to testify on behalf of the city in opposition to the bill, but she wanted you to be aware that other local governments in the state are going to send elected officials and senior management to be there. So you're, of course, invited to attend and to testify if you would like, although she will be there. Just a few other items of note. Assembly Bill 376 regarding star bonds. The staff report that you have in front of you says it would be in a work session today. That did not happen. A number of the bills in the staff report in front of you talk about potential work session today, tomorrow, or Friday. Those dates are dancing all around. It's in constant flux. So please keep that in mind when you're looking at those schedules. And I think with that, I would take any direction and any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Good? Doesn't appear to be. I just have one that I had a note, SB 275, and I see that the city is going to support that. That's for graffiti or other destruction to, it lifts the fines for historical properties, as I understand, but that, we're supporting that, so I support that 100%, because I think it's more about historical properties, or, I'm trying to read it right now. The value of 5,000 or more, this bill provides provision, aggregation, the value of the cost, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else has anything? Councilman Srazza?
Yeah, Chris, do you have an update on Senator Leslie's bill?
304?
304?
The only update I have regarding that is that there's a potential for that to go into a work session tomorrow. But again, like my note that I made, those work session schedules are in constant flux.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I think we may want to do as council, because I think this bill is getting traction and probably will pass. I mean, I think if possible, just a question for the council is that we try and work with the bill sponsor to come up with a question that's objective. And I tried to do this last council meeting, but I think we're making a mistake if we don't do that and the language goes out the way it is. Because I think the way the question is worded, it skews it towards a certain way. And so I'd rather sit down with the bill sponsor and see if we can get a question on there that would explain to the voters how our system works now and how it would work if people were just elected from their own districts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Fine. Comments? Councilman Hastio?
So would So what you're suggesting is we would withdraw the opposition?
Yeah,
And
I think
then-
we should withdraw the opposition. Also, I think the Sixth Ward, that part of the legislation is problematic in the sense that, I think constitutionally, to redraw that district could be challenging if you, no matter where that person was. So I think we need to sit down with the bill sponsor too on that, the provision for the Sixth Ward, and
So we'd go neutral then until we were able to,
or participate in the work session. I'm sorry.
or support or amend, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
go
I
with
mean,
position.
support if amended. If we go into I think we could go into work session and I don't know, who would look at this? I think Pierre, that was your concern. You actually brought this up last time, Councilman Haschef, on the wording of the question itself. So I didn't know if you had some suggestions there. And I understand, Councilman Dortch, where you're coming from. Again, it's a home rule issue. The problem is, I think that this one's going to pass.
What if we stayed neutral? What if we stayed neutral until you had that meeting and found out if you could actually make the changes you're talking about, and then took a position on it? Does that change it in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I don't mind doing it that way either, and maybe having Cadence ask the bill sponsor if she'll sit down with us and hear our concerns about making sure that the question really goes through both sides of the arguments, because I think it's fair to ask the voters. If the voters weren't being asked, I'd be opposed to the bill, but what this does is it goes out to the voters. But I think the question has got to be done so it's fairly written, so people understand what it is they're exactly voting for. Because right now, I mean, really what it says, should the voters vote for the council person from their wards? Well, of course. I mean, everyone's going to answer yes, because people think that's how we're voted on, how it is already. So, and I think there has to be both sides of the argument. The other side of the argument is we're elected by the entire city right now, because all the decisions that we make affect everyone in the city of Reno. But this question doesn't explain that, you know, would you rather vote for all your council members or just the one from your ward?
But I think that's the intent. But I mean, let's be honest. That's what she wants.
Yeah.
That's the intent. I mean,
But I think Councilperson Surprise makes a good point, is to let the voters be informed about the vote. I know that's what the bill maker may want, but the voters have to be informed of what the decision they're making when they vote. So I understand that. Councilman Ayazi.
Yeah, for me, even if this wording goes out, there's other things in this bill that should be changed that would clean stuff up for us. For instance, it says that we have to establish that sixth ward by July 1st of 2013. But is there anything that would stop us? I don't know if we have to redistrict. I haven't looked at the census data, whether we have to redistrict or not. But perhaps what we should do right now is redistrict with 5 and redistrict with 6, and sort of say that at-large person would have to live in that district next time they run. You know, that would help ease things through if it did pass. Otherwise, it's going to be a big mess. So there's some things in here that if it does pass, no matter what language is in there, I think we could have some positive input to. Like when does it happen? How does it happen? And that should be in the bill, because that's certainly not anything that she seems to be thinking about. You know, the one thing she wants is everyone elected in their ward, but she's not thinking of the ramifications about how that gets done.
I don't think she's concerned about the ramifications.
I understand that. That's why we should be concerned with it.
But I think it's always, I mean, I think we're better off trying to go down there and explain those things than just taking a position in opposition.
And you know what, I'm always for trying to make two sides meet and see if we can do that. So I support that. I'm just wondering, throw one other thing into it, is we have 5 people that represent 5 wards. the mayor's elected by the entire city. What would be wrong with still having an at-large person?
Exactly, I think
And
that's
if-
important.
You have that, still having a large person, you have a mayor, that they're, if voters decide they wanted the people elected from their ward, you would have the at-large and the mayor, that the whole city would, and we don't have to go into that redistricting, because we still have 5 wards that are well-defined, and we've made accommodations
Right.
every January, if, like Councilman Ayazi and I, that are adjacent to one another, that his ward was growing, and so mine expanded to keep the numbers within 5%. So that's something that I'd like to see explained, that we'd still have an at-large person, we still have a mayor, but we do have 5 people representing their individual wards, if that's what the voters want. So that's my say on that. Councilman Haschef.
Yeah, the only concern I'd have with leaving it neutral is really doesn't establish our position. Neutral to me means we don't care one way or
Yeah,
another.
that's true.
I think if we say support if amended, it sends the message that if it's not amended based on the suggestions, then we'll oppose it, which I think is
Yeah.
I
fair.
think
And
you
ultimately, if it's going to get, I agree with you, Dan, I think we should just work to some kind of, see if we can get those amendments in. Otherwise, we may get something we don't want.
I agree. I think you're absolutely right. Neutral means you're just neutral, you don't care. You're vanilla. Yeah, we need to be flavored.
So I'll make the motion that we'll support it if amended and direct staff to work with the sponsor to adjust the language and try to address the comments you heard today. And then presumably, Dave, if you have any others, you could email staff. I'm focused in on the wording because I think it just gives you a certain outcome which is not acceptable.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
We have a second. Further discussion?
Yeah, and just, Chris, if you tell the sponsor, I'd be more than happy to meet with the senator and tell our concerns, because I do think one thing about the at-large seat, and I believe why it was created, was if there's a conflict for any particular reason for someone within their district, which happens from time to time, then you have the at-large person who takes over those responsibilities. So we've relied on Pierre to do that. So I think that's an important part of the argument, is that for the at-large seat and why it's there.
I think you make a good point about that.
We can make the argument of why this shouldn't happen at all anyway.
Yeah, but as you know, Dwight,
but-
sometimes we get stuff,
Yeah.
whether we like it or not, it's coming. So you might as well try to change things to the extent you can rather than just take it as written, which is obviously not acceptable. So,
Councilman Zadra?
Well, and as I stated when we talked about this once before, the at-large really is essential, because this bill would not take effect until 13. So the person potentially wouldn't be elected for 3 more years even after that. So the person who was filling that 6th ward could totally live somewhere else in this city entirely, and not even close to that 6th ward if we did that. It just really does speak to the need to maintain that at-large seat.
Councilman Ayazi?
Do we have any idea how the city of Henderson, what their position is in Carson City and Sparks?
I do not know that, but I can find that out and get it to you.
Well, it'll be over, but at least through Friday. I was just curious if they've taken positions in favor or opposition.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
So the motion passes 5-1. Yes.
Clarification for staff, what we're requesting is that the wording, the ballot language wording be clarified, that we eliminate language for a 6th ward and keep the at-large member, and then make the offer that Councilmember Srazza will meet with the bill
I don't
sponsor.
care, anybody can go down there. I just don't have an issue. I just think
Clar-
somebody
clarifying.
should sit down with her from the council. I do.
Mr. Hester,
Cadence informed me that she has
would
already.
you identify yourself, please?
Sorry, John Hester, Assistant City Manager. Cadence informed me she's already met with Senator Leslie about this, and the response was, I am open to hearing your amendments. She didn't say she would accept them or not, so I think she is aware of them already. But we'll go back and redouble that effort.
Thank you. Okay, we have motion passed 5-1. Let's move on to agenda item A7. Update on the tracking fire department overtime and staffing policy. Chief Hernandez.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, Madam Manager. Mike Hernandez, Reno Fire Chief. You have before you a report as requested by council regarding weekly updates, regarding our position with our status with overtime. As you will see, our overtime line item remains constant at $12,000 for the pay period ending, the second pay period ending for March. And our callback pay, now those are the two items that we directly have control over. Spiked a little bit, went from $3,074 last quarter to $5,400 this quarter. What you do not see reflective in the report is the overtime FLSA, which is federally mandated. At the time that we generated this report, it had not been uploaded into the payroll system. Uploaded into the payroll system, so we were not able to capture that data. Typically, that number is between $20,000 and $26,000. So you can anticipate that bottom line figure being in the $65,000 to $70,000 range for the pay period. Per the request of Acting City Manager Kevin Knutson, he requested that we provide council a snapshot of our overall budget, and that's shown on the third page of your report. It does show specifically where we are over with respect to our overtime and other items. Specifically, you'll note that the two items that we are significantly over budget on are the overtime or the comp time payouts and the holiday payouts. This is the holiday premium pay. We are close to $800,000 over budget in those items. Now, please understand that those items are contractual, and they are difficult to project for and balance, or I'm sorry, they are difficult to cost out simply because by the contract, those are items that a member can either A, elect to roll over from pay period to pay period to pay period, B, can cash out, or C, can use as time off. So as we build the budget, we look at those past histories, and we try and project as best we can based on previous year's use how those items should be funded. You'll note that on the comp time payout, those were unfunded, and in previous budgets past, we have had enough built into our budget so that we could absorb whatever use was paid out in that specific line item. However, because of the reductions that we've made this budget year and last budget year, we did not fund that line item. And because of the reduction we took in early December, that left us basically nothing within our budget to absorb these payouts. So it's important to note that this report was based on our amended budget, and there are some changes to the report, and I've asked Gayla Emery to address some of those changes should you want some more specific numbers on how we anticipate covering the overage and those type of things.
Chief, there is one number that needs to be changed, that Gayla, on the amended budget, that is not correct in this spreadsheet. Want that on the record, please?
Gayla Emery, Office of Management and Budget. The holiday pay line item on this 542.72 should be 804. We knew that this number was wrong, so when we worked on this year's budget and we came up with that, what we needed to balance this year, we had already increased that number up to 804. So that helps bring that number of the overexpenditure down a couple $100,000.
Gayla, that's
Yes.
in the budget.
It's in the re-estimated budget, which is what we've been talking about, so we've covered the shortage already. I haven't done an augmentation for it yet, but I will be. And that's covered with all the numbers that we've talked about over the last few weeks. That was part of the shortage that we had this year.
So Gayla, that brings that number down to approximately 625,000.
We got it down to, be down to 580.
580.
Mm-hmm. The other item is there's a reimbursement that will be coming in for about $292,000, and that will also apply against this. So our final number that we're short is $286,000,
Councilman Sifraza?
okay? And that's what we're still working on to cover. Yes, it is.
Yep.
Councilmember, if I could, there are also, you know, one of the challenges I face as the chief is that this is a very dynamic business model for running an organization. It's entirely dependent on our staffing system. However, we do have some mechanisms built in at the end of the budget year. For example, our contract with Truckee Meadows, we do what's called a true-up, and there will be opportunities there to look at types of fires that we responded to that involve the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District that may or may not have incurred overtime. So there may be some offsets as well to that final figure. Again, it's a very fluid, dynamic system that I struggle to work with. But you know, we are very cognizant of our overtime. We realize that's a hot button issue. To the best of our managerial ability, we work to control that and balance that with the service delivery to the community.
Thank you. Councilman Sifraza?
Yeah, Chief, I'm not sure if this is for Renee or the chief or Gayla, who it's for, because or the attorney's office, because the PERS ruling on callback, if you read the ruling, those employees hired after, I believe, July 1st, 2009 are exempt from having to pay the PERS compensable overtime. That I was reading that in the PERS. Am I right on that, Renee?
Renee Burgess, Human Resources. Yes, you are.
Okay, so how does payroll staff know that those who are hired, do we have anyone still on staff because of the RIFs?
I don't think so.
Because that was done, so everyone else essentially with less than 12 hours, because we keep talking about how PERS changed the rules, but when I went back and read the rules again, essentially what it said is, no, it still applies to everyone hired before July 1st, 2009. They're still getting that callback rate.
That's correct.
So essentially everyone in the fire department is still getting callback.
Only if
With the less than 12 hours.
with if it's less than 12 hours notice, yes. If the employer is notified with less than 12 hours notice.
Okay, and then Chief, have you had time to do the analysis, and I don't know if this is something that the auditors are doing, for the 2 hours, how much it's costing us to have people call in 2 hours before shift?
We have identified that as far as the Kafori audit, and we are hoping that she can assist when we go back, because I think we're going to go back a significant number of years. But I mean, when it comes right down to it, whether it's 2 hours or 10 hours in advance, it still creates a vacancy. And the trigger point is a 12-hour notice where it becomes a PERS compensable overtime callback.
Yeah, which
So,
is an
but-
extra 37%. We're not
Correct.
talking chump change here. We're talking about a lot of money.
You're correct, but in the fact that from my perspective, it creates a vacancy that whether they call me at 2 or at midnight, it's a vacancy I got to fill. And you're right, it does become PERS compensable after the 12-hour.
And then, is there a way, since this is all done in the telestaff system, for example, I wanted to say, how many people called in 2 hours to take a vacation day last week? How many times did that occur?
I believe we can generate those reports, yes.
How quickly can we get that? I mean, isn't that what telestaff's supposed to do? It's supposed to be this great system and be able to give us all this stuff.
Brent Swearingen, Division Chief of the Fire Department. It is a very good system, and it does capture that. However, we did a statistical audit a while ago to look at that, and one of the things we're asking Kafori to do is to give us some tools so we can drill down further into the database than we have the ability to do right now. I can find that, but it's 11 mouse clicks for each time somebody takes off. So it's very cumbersome right now, and we're asking Kafori to help us develop those tools, so we can just give you a snapshot of what we're looking at on that.
But I guess, how much time would it take you to find out how many people called in less than, within the 2 hours for vacation?
I believe that if we had a short time window to research, let's say a month, just if we had to go back a month and look back.
I'm just asking for
Yeah.
last week, for example.
I think we can generate those reports.
Okay, and then the other question I had is, and maybe this is for legal, because I just don't see how we can't stop overtime altogether. We have the FLSA, I understand, and if there was a wildfire that happened and we called others to the scene, but isn't it council's responsibility to set the staffing levels? That's not contractual, is it?
Tracy Chase, City Attorney's Office. We haven't specifically legally researched that issue. If you'd like us to, we can take it and get back to you next week on it.
Well, I guess the question is then, how do you do RIFs if that's the case?
I think there are different powers. The council has the right to set the budget, and if the budget is reduced and the city managers, as the executive, chief executive officer of city deems that risks are appropriate, you direct the manager's office to pursue those risks.
Because
we're setting the standards now. Our staffing levels for firefighters, we can't do it for the battalion chiefs, but for firefighters, we're setting staffing levels now.
That's correct, Councilman. You are via a reduced budget. In essence, what occurs is I'm given a budget, and I am asked to advise the city manager, what does this mean in terms of service delivery? If I need to take a 1%, 2%, 9% reduction, I go back, staff analyzes it, we will have to brown out X number of stations, reduce service to this component, et cetera. And so theoretically, in a roundabout way, you do manage the delivery of service via the budget that's given to me. The challenge for me as the chief is I've got to manage, first and foremost, my responsibility to the citizens and their safety versus the dollars I'm given to do that. And then that third ball in the air are the contractual obligations to the labor organizations.
But this is the issue I see. I'm sorry, but you guys are going to have to, I think it should be on our next week's agenda. Cut your budget $300,000, because this isn't planned for. We don't have, I would assume when staff comes and does their budgeting before the council, what's the outstanding liabilities? Because you're saying on the holiday and the callback time, what's the total liability for that? Let's say people cash out all of it over the next 3 months. What's that dollar figure, Gayla? Since we have no control over that.
I'm looking through the stuff here, because someplace in here I saw that number.
I think it's in the notes.
These notes. For compensation, for the overtime comp payouts, looks like the balance right now is $87,000. But the holiday accrual balance is $931,000 right now.
So essentially, there's $1 million in liabilities on the books.
Just
Correct.
point of clarification, Gayla, I think what the council member is asking is if everyone who
Yes.
had.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, right now.
If every single person who had, because I understand, I'm assuming with staff's budgets, they've done it based on what the actual usage has been in the past, correct? When you guys bring forward, it's an average of what people are cashing out year after year.
Unfortunately, what's happened in the past is we have not budgeted for those payouts, because normally through a normal year, there's enough savings within the department to cover what those payouts are. We don't have those savings now because we've stripped all those savings out. So next year, we are definitely looking at how we're going to budget for those items.
Well, this is the whole issue I'm talking about when our assistant city manager comes forward. What are those liabilities? What are they with everyone in the city? I think this is something that's got to be on the books. You don't know when that employee is going to cash out their vacation time and sick time. But I've got to tell you, this overtime issue, it hasn't changed in 5 years. It just hasn't. And I think we need to set a policy of no more. No more. I think it's got to come back on the next council agenda, and you're going to have to cut your budget $300,000, Chief.
Yes, ma'am. And if I could address the first part of that issue regarding fully funding that component, what makes that tricky, the wild card to those two specific items is the fact that they can be banked or they can be utilized as time off. As such, we can fully fund them, and at the end of the year have $750,000 that would either roll over or, as a continued, and at this point, because budgets are so tight, we do the best we can in terms of projecting out what we're going to need. So yes, option A is we could fully fund those liabilities. In fact, we may be overfunding those liabilities because of the contractual language. You can use it or bank it or take it in terms of pay. And regarding reducing my overtime budget by $300,000 and completely eliminating I look at my overtime budget as a management tool and an operational tool. It allows me to temporarily rent, if you will, a body to fill a vacancy that occurs during the shift. If I am completely limited or restricted from using those funds, it would have a significant negative impact on the number of stations that we staff to provide service. And that, it could potentially get down to 4 stations, 3 stations for the entire city. And there's also the ramifications regarding the interlocal agreement with Truckee Meadows, because we are obligated to provide a certain level of service to that system as well. So I would be very cautious. I understand that overtime is a hot button issue. Certainly I do. And we are looking at correcting some of those things through the negotiation process. But to limit my ability to utilize overtime funds to temporarily fill vacancies would be fairly significant, and it would be an extremely negative impact to the community.
But Chief, where do you suggest we get that money then? Because you guys are $300,000 over budget. You're going to go $300,000 over budget. Council adopted a budget. And now if we had every department in the city coming forward, that's another $300,000.
Yes, ma'am. And I have initiated some requests and some meetings with the acting city manager, who's also our budget director, to come up with alternatives. Again, we are doing the best we can with the management tools that we do have and the assets that we have.
Can I ask just one question? If it seems like there's some play here in that overtime comp payout, is there anything we can do contractually to say that whoever has, has that comp time, it's still available to them, but they can't take it until after July 1st? Is there any 60-day moratorium we could put in to say that you can't take it till a certain date, just so, because they wouldn't lose it, they still have it, it's still on the books, but it would help the city in any shortfall that we might have?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I think 2 things. One, contractually, they do have the ability to utilize that. We could ask for forbearance. I think larger issue is you take the current liability from this fiscal year and
roll
push
it to the next.
That liability further into next fiscal year. I think what I would like to do, again, Kevin Knutson, your interim city manager, will be back next week talking with the chief to see where we can come up with that $286,000. Again, Councilmember Zadra and Councilmember Ayazi are also in part of the discussions with Truckee Meadows. There's some additional true-up that we are talking to them about that might be able to cover this. And I do say that with the caveat that this is projected, doing the best that we can to control it with the means available to us. I think it's a council decision and certainly policy to say that the department will be responsible for that the city will choose to use stabilization. Those are the policy decisions. When it comes down to operations, if for whatever reason it's all captains that call in sick that day and there's no ability to bring back a captain through overtime, it could further impact the system. So at this point, what I would suggest or recommend to the council is that we can bring this back at the next meeting for a policy decision that says, is it absorbed within the budget of the department? Is it something that the council would like to look to the stabilization fund for, and go from there and leave the operational issues to again provide the best service possible to
Let me just clear something. I understand that pushing the liability forward is not the wisest thing to do, but I do agree with Councilman Safraza. I mean, we're estimated it's 300,000. It could be worse. Then
That's absolutely
if
correct.
you think it's bad enough now in closing stations, I don't give everybody in town a bucket of sand in case there's a fire. I mean, you know, it's at least I would know that I'd have that liability. I wouldn't know what the exact number is, but I know it wouldn't be any worse than it is now. That's the only reason I say that. I hesitate in pushing the liability forward, but the unknown scares me more than anything.
And I do have some significant concerns because we are touching the very beginning of the wildfire season. And we have been very fortunate in past seasons that we have not had any major significant events. Granted, portions of those responses are federally reimbursed. However, they do tax our system. And while we go and fight the fire on the mountain, we still have to deliver service within our jurisdiction. So it's the proverbial between a rock and a hard place here. You know, if I can't use my overtime to again rent bodies temporarily to keep those stations open, I have no choice but to close more stations. And frankly, we're at a point where I'm very concerned at the number of stations that we're down to now.
Councilman Ayasi.
Chief, this $37 million budget, the amount that we cut, that assumes that we get all the savings from our layoffs, correct?
Correct.
So the true-ups isn't going to make us any more money, Sue. In fact, it may be less. If the county doesn't agree to those true-ups that we need, this, and from what I'm hearing, they're not agreeing yet to give us all of the money. This is going to be a larger deficit, not a smaller deficit. That's something that I think we're trying to get a joint meeting together the 1st of May or something about this. And this is one of the issues is the true-ups, because we've been laying off and it doesn't affect the county, but they're saying it does. So we've got to decide how much are they going to pay for that and how much they aren't. So that's not going to make this better. That's can only make this worse or stay the same.
Well, and as a point of reference, council member, we have noted in some previous calculations where we were under calculating how we were determining some of the true-ups. We caught those during this phase, and we have brought those forward to the county.
I know, they just have to be agreed to. So
That's correct.
We can't assume that they're going to be done.
Correct.
So this could still get worse from this. And then when did the overtime budget go from 780 to $1,073,000? It said they amended budget. Did that come to council or was that just done internally?
Gayla, Emery, that came to council. It was through a budget augmentation, and it was for grants and or strike team reimbursements.
Okay. And then I think that one of the things we should be looking at in our budget for next year is why don't we budget for these things that are outstanding? Whether we put it in stabilization and say, well, we're going to have this here so that if everyone takes it, it's budgeted for, but we've got to do that now for our budget to say whether we might have to put another $1 million into stabilization for that.
Yes, that's one of the things that we will be looking at.
So, but that's going to really affect if we have to do more. Because what we're asking the employees to do is not based on any of those things yet. It's based on what has come forward now. So if we need another $1 million to fund this, then we haven't been asking for the right amount of money. Right. But I think we should do it with all the departments and say that's just, you know, it's good. So we at least start getting to where we don't have unfunded liabilities out there.
One issue that's slightly different is in the other contracts, there are limits to the amount of vacation that you can ask to cash out, and that's different in the fire CBA.
And then the other problem, Chief, there's two things, and I think what we might need is a presentation for the public of how you staff. Because
Certainly.
we have, what's our minimum staffing now, 68?
60 currently, and we have 72 assigned per shift. However,
so on certain days, if everyone comes to work that day, there's 12 personnel who we pay, and it opens up an additional station.
Yes.
So the other thing that we could look at is say, look, these are the stations we're going to keep open. We're not going to continue to, that's how we can make this up. We're not going to bring 12 people back. We'll, instead of 72, we might say we'll do 66. Because I'd be curious to know how many days we have opened up an additional station that just on that day it happens to be open. That maybe that's the way we look at cutting and say, look, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. Open up those additional stations. We've already decided these are the ones we're browning out for this year. Because the big problem that I think Councilman Sfraza has and the rest of us, every time we say, well, wait another week, it's another week down the road and we can't solve the problem. And when it comes up and says, well, you'll have to decide to take it out of stabilization, what choice are we going to have at the end of the fiscal year? We have no choices.
Yeah.
But we have choices now because I believe we can set standards like, you know, don't bring 72 people in every day, bring in 66.
And you're correct. We do have, 72 assigned, and as we are browned out to 8 stations, we need a minimum of 60. However, because of the formula used in how we calculate available personnel that can take time off, that's a percentage. So, and that number comes up to, I believe, 14 individuals. So right off the bat, if everybody takes, their time off, we're already below the 60 where we have to call back just to maintain the stations to the brownout level.
I understand that, Chief, but our problem is we also, that sort of points out the problem. We have to staff 12 personnel every single day in case someone calls in 2 hours before.
Yeah,
if we had some more management, say you got to call in your sick and not your sick time, but some of these other things a couple days ahead, we wouldn't have to do that. So it doesn't necessarily have to come from overtime. We could also cut from that figure and just say that we're not going to open more stations, at least through the rest of this fiscal year.
Yeah. We can certainly work on a presentation.
Another question for the attorneys, because technically we don't have a contract. The contract's expired. So on this 2-hour rule and these types of things, why can we say you got to give 2 weeks' notice? I mean, we don't have a contract.
Tracy Chase, Reno City Attorney's Office. The contracts have a provision that the terms of the agreements continue in place and force in effect until a new contract is agreed to. We can take a look at that in our analysis that we'll provide you. Some of the things, like if they're date specific, like you get a raise on this date, wouldn't necessarily continue because that contractual term is related to a specific date, a specific action that is fulfilled when it is completed. So we can look at that as well, but we do have those contract terms are continuing under the contract.
Councilman,
I just want to follow up on that. What would happen if we just said we're doing 3-person crews? That's what we're going to do. I would imagine there'd be a grievance filed, and that would take some time to get through.
Tracy Chase, Reno City Attorney's Office. Those types of actions would necessarily lead to, I believe, the union and pursuing remedies that they would have under the contractual agreement.
Right, so they could
Sure.
file a grievance, and we could go through this process, and in some amount of time we may get, I'd be curious, it'd probably have to be done behind closed doors, but what would be the worst downside for the city? Would it have to be that we have to discontinue that practice, or we have to actually pay for a 4th person even though they've never worked? We might want to look at that, because if it takes 2 years for arbitration, which is what it's been taking, maybe that's something we just have to start doing for the safety of the city. Just say, sorry, we'll have to take the arbitration on when it comes. So this is what we're doing. And look, or look at some of these other provisions like the 2-hour rule and say, sorry, we can't do that anymore.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up, Tracy, based on the chief's testimony and it being a public safety issue. In looking at the PERS rules now, it says the mayor or the local governing body has to declare a state of emergency. I mean, if that happened, if the mayor were to do that, I mean, couldn't we enforce notice for this issue? Because this issue, the 2 hours and the chief not having the management rights to be able to schedule for vacation times and everything else, it is a state of emergency for the city, a public safety state of emergency if we go below the 60 people. And how do we do that within our budgetary constraints? Again, another $300,000 that's over budget. And primarily due to you have to have that extra staffing, as Councilman Ayazi pointed out, which is driving up these overtime numbers.
Tracy Chase, Reno City Attorney's Office. We will add that to the research we're completing for you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Not a
Council?
question, just, I want to sort of update a little bit on the Fire Advisory Board, as this relates to this directly.
Please do.
What we decided at the Fire Advisory Board, as part of our standard of cover, and there's the regional standard of cover that was completed that we just saw the other day. The county, I'm not sure what action they took yesterday. I think they just accepted the report.
Yes, sir. The county did, Washoe County did accept the standards of cover report.
And so they're looking at a joint meeting with Reno and Washoe County to look at what some of those standards would be for us, to look at perhaps whether we should just go looking at a district or some other way of doing things. And at the Fire Advisory Board, we said we're sort of open to look at those things. But I made the comment yesterday, and I'll do it here, I was going to do it in the legislative stuff. If that one bill passes that forces our hand in how to district, I'm personally not interested in looking at districting at all. To me, that's off the table.
Correct, and for the record, Mike Hernandez, Reno Fire Chief, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Washoe County Commissioners also voted not to support, I believe it's AB 287 or 278, which it mirrors the Metropolitan Police model out of Las Vegas. So.
And I don't think, personally, I don't have to oppose it. It's just, if it passes, then if people in this area want this district, if that passes, it's not going to happen here as far as I'm concerned.
I'm not intimately familiar with the details of that specific legislation, how it would force us, if we wanted to do a district, it would force us to do either a JPA or some other mechanism other than that specific model that's being put forth.
Well, it has a elected board, which
Right.
I'm not actually opposed to some of those things, but it's the cherry picking part of it that's
right. And I think the county commissioners recognize that as well and refuse to
But I
support
think the union
that.
needs to hear that too, because they're the ones who really want the district, and I think that I honestly believe we could get to a district, but if this passes, I don't think we'll ever get to one.
And on the subject of a district, it would certainly be, in my professional opinion, extremely beneficial to this community. The governance model and the funding model would have to be worked out specifically, but it would resolve just a whole host of issues, and especially if we can approach the labor organizations and develop a much more pragmatic and comprehensive labor agreement. So, yeah.
So they're trying to schedule a time when people can all be here the next 2 weeks or so we can have that joint meeting with the county, and not with Sparks. It wouldn't be the standard one, because this is just between Washoe County and the city of Reno to look at those fire issues and what we want to do.
Again, I'm sorry.
Didn't the county agree yesterday to put a fire station up at Arrow Creek that's been talked about?
That, as I understand, Councilman Guston or Vice Mayor, they did not take action on that. They were discussing awarding the contract for construction of that. The consultant does recommend that station. They're having some funding challenges, if you will, and some staffing challenges, if you will, that the fire chief has yet to identify how he's going to address. Okay. But they took no action on awarding that contract.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Chief, thank you. I think you got
Thank you very much. Just
orders.
as just a quick note, RFD staff is in the process of basically packing our boxes and relocating. So generating some reports may be time challenged, but we'll do the best we can to get those reports to you, in a timely manner. But we're in the process of moving. So computers are down, staff.
Yeah, Chief, let's clarify that for anyone who's listening. It's moving from a building that we currently
lease. Correct.
And those people are moving into this building, so there will
That's
be
correct. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. A8, Councilman Surprise, Award 3, appointment to your Neighborhood Advisory Board.
Just clarification on A7, is that coming back next council meeting then?
You asked for it.
Okay. Yeah, just the two appointments, would be Robert Permew and Dario Delgado.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. A9.
Second.
We are adjourned.